Welcome back to the Bullish Bounce, where we like to talk about world events and how they might impact your financial future. So really, we're going to be going through Trump's tariff plans today because it's been an absolute shit show, and I've come out of hiatus that I've really been in since my honeymoon. We are going to get started by looking at the S&P 500. You can see here in the last month, we've been in an absolute disaster. The last 2 trading days alone, we've seen a 10% drop, but really in the last 2 months, we are down 17.5%. Many tech companies, high growth companies that do well with strong growth expectations, some have dropped 30-40%. A lot of key questions that we all have, me included, is we want a bit of a trajectory about where is the economy going to be going for the rest of 2025 with all of these tariff news headlines coming out. So all I'm going to do is try and compare this current situation to the only recent one we have that is at all similar, and that was the trade war that happened throughout 2018 between America and China. I do want to let you guys know that these videos probably won't get seen in the algorithm because I did take a little hiatus. So if you want this video to be seen, make sure you hit the like button, but also comment down below, comment if you like these tariffs or not, because that will help the video get seen and kickstart the channel again, and we can get straight back to it. Going to a stock chart of the same thing, the S&P 500, but this time we are looking at really the start of 2018, and for the next 18 months, how did American stocks perform and also the economy? Most of the big news about that trade war happened in that first really 3-month period of 2018, and you could see there was some really big volatility there, big drops of around 10-12%. In that first 3-month period. Again, we've already eclipsed that. We are down 17.5% today. But the thing I wanted to point out here were those drops were about 25% of tariffs on only about $60 billion worth of goods out of China. And, they had some reciprocal tariffs on the United States. But overall, there wasn't that much news. The amount of money involved with that little trade war was minuscule. But one thing I wanted to point out here, we saw around a 20% drop at the end of that year from October all the way through to the end of the year. Maybe we could use that as inspiration for what could happen for the rest of 2025. We have maybe this big initial drop in the market. When we get all this news come out, we're all very scared, and there was some big sales in the market. However, often there's this bounce that happens for, who knows, 1 month, 2 months, where we see returns back in the market as people just say, look, everyday life is basically the same. My companies are still reporting positive earnings. We're still seeing the job market hold up very strong so far in 2025. Maybe we could actually survive, and this America-focused economy could actually work just fine. However, when we start going through the fundamental details of these tariff plans that we're going to spend the rest of this video talking about, we'll see with all this negativity, these are real fundamental negatives that could drop corporate profits on average in the United States by 10 to 20%. We could see that same pattern happen, and maybe even quicker in 2025. Big initial drop very early on, a couple months of positivity, and then the big massive crash when we fear recession. That's enough rambling here. Let's get to some actual data to see just how bad things really are, especially compared to that 2018 time period, where China alone, for example, they were only getting tariffed on about $60 billion worth of products. In other words, we are roughly quadrupling the tariffs we had on China and putting those on top. If China was the only one getting tariffed, I think that alone could put America and China into pretty much a recession or a very weak state, stock market declines of 20-30%. But not only do we have that situation, we also have key trading partners and friends of the United States also getting tariffed 20-30% depending on the country. Some little dogs like Australia, I think we've only got a 10% tariff. But again, think of everyday products in your life that you buy. It could be food or your car or washing machine, whatever. That probably was not made in America, and even if it was, it has components or materials that need to get imported. And to help explain why I think this is an absolute disaster, or at least the positives that people might be seeing, just I don't think will happen, I've got this article from the ABC and they've got some really nice talking points. And the first one here is the Trump administration was trying to use these as a bargaining chip. How come they're doing this with 200 countries all at once? I believe there's around 180 countries that have been tariffed by America, and each of those countries need to meet with America's trade negotiation team who are trying to make all these deals. How are they going to meet with 180 countries, in the same week or even the same month? That's pretty much impossible. Negotiating with China in 2018 took basically a whole year, and they didn't even come to any deals. They just placed on some tariffs on each other. Moving on to the next quote here, they have a statement about the average weighting of tariffs is around 29% for United States imports now. So that means if we looked at the total imports into America, whatever price they are now 29% higher. If we also keep in mind that around 20% of the yearly GDP of America is made up by imports and exports, other countries are going to place tariffs back on America as well. For the most part, China and Europe have already stated this. Then pretty much 20% of the GDP of America going to be negatively affected. But we haven't even talked about the loss of profit of, people losing their jobs. Again, I want to make a steelman argument here, trying to think of the best possible outcome that can happen. And even if that is negative, what does that really say about the entire situation? For example, all those lost jobs working on the docks or, manufacturing all these products overseas. Let's say a bunch of labor and money can be funneled into the United States and make all of these factories that can, make towels and make shoes and cars, everything else. All of that production really needs to double in the United States. In how long is that going to take? Is that going to take 3 months, 6 months? That's probably going to take 3 to 5 years. Have you ever seen a construction on the scale of a giant factory in your city be done in 6 months? I don't think that's going to happen. So the amount of factories and manufacturing that needs to be taken place to build $5 trillion worth of goods, I really just don't think that's going to happen. That could take another decade or two. In other words, that positive outcome of buying American only is just not going to happen. So if people can't buy the product anymore because they don't have an equivalent one in America, then maybe people could just buy the tariff product. Maybe America will just make huge amounts of profit off of these tariffs. However, when we start looking at history of maybe the 2018 tariffs and what happened with prices and the economy, there's a difference between tariffing $60 billion of product from one country versus the average 30% tariff that is literally happening from everywhere outside of the United States and to products coming into America. You cannot avoid those price increases because America itself cannot make all of those products. Obviously, that was the bad news portion of the video. Now I'm going to do some good news and put together kind of a summary of what I expect to happen to the American stock market and corporate profits. However, first up, I've got here, Vietnam has done a deal with America, or at least trying to do one.
The president is saying on Truth Social, he just had a very productive call with the General Secretary of the Communist Party of Vietnam on the tariffs, saying that this man told him that Vietnam wants to cut their tariffs down to zero if they are able to make an agreement with the U.S. Trump says that he replied by thanking him on behalf of the U.S. and saying he looked forward to a meeting in the near future.
Of course, the giant bully picking on the tiny little guy of Vietnam is going to win that argument. We've already seen people come out of China and Europe saying they want to put on tariffs back on America, and we're not going to give in to Trump the bully. The second potential outcome, which I think is going to be much more common, and that, for example, was with Canada and Mexico, who did a deal with America saying, okay, we're only going to tariff cars and things like the wood exports that came from Canada into America. America has wood. Things like oil and also aluminium. America needs to have an industry just in terms of we need to be able to build tanks and ships if we go to war. So yes, we need those products built into the United States. So only Key manufacturing hubs of America are going to be protected, and things that are based on national security. So we could see the overall tariff drop quite quickly because most everyday products don't fit those two categories. So when we start looking at the projections of what's going to happen for American companies in terms of revenue and profit margins for 2025, we can start to create a bit of a picture about what's going to happen to the stock market and to the economy. So first up, we were expecting 2025 to have decent revenue growth. Yeah, revenues maybe still grow in 2025. People still have increasing wages, but maybe not 10% revenue growth for this year for American companies. Maybe it's only a 5% revenue growth. But when we look at the profit margins of American companies, they're sitting at around 13%. So for every dollar American companies make, they make about 13 cents in profit. I think this is where we're really going to get smashed by these tariffs, because when people get that 30% increase because of tariffs, maybe the final product only has an increase in price of 20%. That means the company has around a 10% hit to their profit margins. Again, if we're looking at this overall economy effect, if it goes from 13% profit margins, even if they drop down to only 10% profit margins, and we have a pretty good outcome here, that's still going to collapse company profits. That's a 30% drop in company profits. All right, guys, that's the video today. I hope you enjoyed it. Hit the like button if you did. Comment your thoughts down below. Tell me if you like these tariffs or you hate these tariffs. Let me know. I just want to thank you for coming back and watching the videos again. I'll see you soon. Also want to thank my YouTube members who stuck by me and continued sponsoring the channel in my absence. Thanks, guys, a lot. See you next time. Bye.